and welcome to this KSP video. Today, we're continuing the tutorial of the last episode, and we're going to be experimenting with creating your first orbital rocket. To start with, you're going to choose a command pod. I choose one of those two just for starters. They're easy, reliable. I chose that one, but you choose whichever one you want. This isn't a direct tutorial like telling you what to make. This is meant to help you understand it, and always after these, just experiment with it. That's the best way to learn anything. Put a parachute on it. I chose one of those, but you can also do the radial ones, and you can mess with how many there are. Next, I just chose a heat shield. This will help us on re-entry, which is when we're coming back into the atmosphere, but we're going so fast that the pressure created from hitting the atmosphere heats up and stuff. I also added a decoupler so we can separate from the fuel tank. So this is effectively a completed module, which will be our first module. Next, I just name it. I decided to name it. Let's see, I completely forgot when I recorded this. Tutorial space test. Is that what that says? Tutorial spacecraft. Mark 1. So anyway, I've named that. Now I just add a fuel tank. There we go. I need to get better at timing my voice to these recordings. Just adding a nice engine. And some fins. Now, this seems good. This is a rocket, obviously. Fuel tank, engine, command module, stuff like that. I'm gonna test fly it. So, you should also save it. That's that button in the corner. And that allows you to, if you click that, you can delete it. And then if you click that open button, you can scroll down, find it through all your saves, and load the craft up. So now I'm just gonna test fly this thing. That's that green button in the corner right there, launch. You might have those tabs below, that's with the DLC. So this flight is pretty simple. I'm trying to fly to orbit. So I take off, fly towards space. All that fire, or technically plasma, doesn't really matter. It could hurt your aircraft, but probably won't. Obviously I have enough delta. I don't have enough fuel to get into orbit. That word I said delta. I'll come back to that later in just a moment. Oh, never mind. It's called delta V. It means basically how much you can push yourself. And it's affected based on atmospheric pressure and the performance of your engine and how much fuel you have. So you might be thinking, to get more delta V, just add more fuel tanks. And by the way, I just took away those fins and grabbed some more fuel tanks. Also, just copying those fuel tanks. If you're on PC, that's holding Alt and then selecting the part, just so you know. Now I have a whole bunch of fuel tanks here, and if I add the engine naturally, it seems like this should be able to go anywhere. Quite a bit of fuel. But no, it only went up a little bit. What is that, like 5,320 something delta V? So maybe if you add more. Let's test that. We added 4 more tanks. I mean, the last test with only 1 tank had more than 2,000 meters per second of delta V, and that barely added anything. This is because, as we add more fuel tanks, the craft gets heavier, and therefore it can't push itself as much, even if it has more fuel. And the more fuel we add, even though it gets more time to burn, it's still heavier. And it's just an infinite cycle getting worse and worse. I'll make a video on that later. That was the most simplified version of that ever. You can also just look up a Wikipedia page on the rocket equation. It's really fascinating. But I'll make a video about it later. Also, you can mess with fuel tanks and stuff when building your thing. Just add a simple second stage, preferably with more fuel than the previous one, just to, and then a more powerful engine. It's just how spacecraft tend to work. Once again, I'll explain this later, but just experiment with it. The more you experiment with this, the deeper your understanding will be. It's kind of hard to explain, but it's always nice to experiment. Also change it to Mark 2, and launch. And before it launches, I'd like to clarify, I got this method from MacLeod. I'll link him in the description. I did not come up with this method to get to orbit, but here it is. You try to start your turn before you get to 1 kilometer, and by 10 kilometers you want to be at about 45 degrees. And the reason you're turning is because as you gain, think of it like throwing a ball. You throw a ball and maybe it goes 10 feet. Well, what if you threw it so far that it just went around the world? But you wouldn't really want to throw it up. You would need to throw it sideways. That's why rockets, though they go up at first, they eventually go sideways. You're gonna want to just push yourself till you're above the atmosphere, which is at 70 kilometers. And by the way, the controls, which I've completely forgot to mention, the controls for a spacecraft are WASD. You're mainly gonna use A and D, which is yaw. And Q and E is roll, and generally just experiment with it. And Z and X is throttle all the way up or down, and shift and control is more precise. After you push to space, you're going to want to stop pushing to space, stop your engine, and wait till you get the highest point in your orbit, your apoapsis, at which point you're going to burn. I set up a maneuver there, but you should be able to just eyeball it. I'll talk about maneuvers later. You could also just experiment with them. Anyways, I just went around the planet. I pushed just to get it to 100 kilometers to get a nice circular orbit. By the way, your first orbits probably won't be that nice and circular. They'll probably be more like egg-shaped. But it's fine. And I think it's called an elliptical orbit. That might be them all. Please don't listen to what I'm saying. Go look up something about it. I'm just doing this off memory. I need to script these better. Anyways, I'm deorbiting, which basically means pointing retrograde, which are what those little things over there do, those little tabs. And they basically allow me to say, well, if I want to point retrograde, or the opposite of my orbit, or prograde towards my orbit. And by the way, at apoapsis earlier, when you pushed into orbit, you want to be pointing prograde to give yourself more energy, and retrograde to take that away. So you might be thinking, oh, if I wanted to deorbit myself, I would want to push down. But no, you want to push retrograde to reduce your energy. Pushing down might actually give you more or less. Anyways, I ditched the orbital stage using the decoupler. Oh, and for that you use space. That's how you start a new stage. I know this is a terrible tutorial, and I'm going more into orbital, very basic, dumbed-down orbital dynamics that are probably still too advanced for me, even the highly dumbed-down versions. But that doesn't matter. I should be teaching people how to play this game, but anyways, yeah, space is how you start a new stage, and then you want to point retrograde so your heat shield is facing towards the atmosphere, because that plasma there is not your friend. And that plasma isn't actually caused by friction, it's caused by things to do with pressure and the air getting forced into itself so much that it turns into plasma, because forms of matter can be caused by pressure and heat, I think. I haven't finished school yet. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Oh, the self-confidence in these videos is astonishing, honestly. Anyways, once you get rid of all the plasma, you're going to want to deploy that parachute, once again, with either space. Also, there's some tabs there that let you mess with the altitude. If you right-click it, you can right-click all sorts of things to mess with different properties. I did that there. I right-clicked the heat shield and jettisoned it after the parachute deployed. Which to do, you need to you can either click space or right-click and find deploy parachute. Also, if you're landing over land, you might want to push that deploy altitude or pressure, mess with the deploy altitude or pressure, which changes the time when the parachute actually opens up like that and starts catching air. Anyway, And the reason this is also poorly filmed is because my computer decided that, once again, manual time warp was not working, so I had to just leave the recording software on. But it worked out in the end, even if it is a little boring. But, it's okay. Anyway, we're coming to the end of the video just now, so there's Splashdown. There should be a video on the left, and a link to my channel on the right. So, if I'll make any corrections either in the description or in this video. Also, please, if I made any mistakes, correct me in the comments, Mr. Zero Persons who sees this. Anyways, subscribe. Please subscribe if you enjoyed, and